Hello and welcome to Meet the Candidates. My name's Kari Steele. I'm host of the Midday Show on iHeartRadio's KOST 103.5 in Los Angeles. And my pleasure to introduce you to our guest today, the current Los Angeles County District Attorney running for re-election, George Gascon. Welcome to Meet the Candidates.
Hello, Kari.
So nice to meet you.
Good to meet you
Pleasure
as well.
to have you here. So this is an opportunity for our listeners to get to know a little bit about you, maybe some things they don't know about you. You have a very impressive resume, quite a career in public service. You served in the United States Army, spent many years with the police department, LAPD, Arizona. I've done my homework.
Oh, my goodness.
San Francisco. All right. And then you decided to do something really dangerous and get into politics.
Yeah. The most dangerous thing I ever done.
Right. I'm saying. So maybe let's start there, okay? Because that would be my number one question. What inspired you to seek public office?
Yeah, it was very unexpected. As you indicated, I dropped out of high school, so I was really having all kinds of issues as a young man. And the Army actually helped me put my life together, and I'm very proud of that opportunity. I was a volunteer when people were getting drafted, and I became a sergeant. I was, so I did well in the Army. And then when I got out, I went to college. I went to Cal State Long Beach.
Go Beach.
Yes.
I'm an alum.
I do. Very cool. Very cool. 49ers. The
That's
good
right.
49ers. And, from there I went into the police department. I was a LAPD officer for about 27 years, starting from the ground. Patrol officer for many years, sergeant, lieutenant, and then went all the way to be assistant chief of police running operations. And then in 2006, I was recruited by the Mesa, Arizona city to run their police department. And Mesa is the third largest city in Arizona. It's near Phoenix. And I was there for 3 years as chief of police. And then, I got in battle in some fights over immigration with then Sheriff Joe Arpaio. And it was in 2009 that I was offered, our governor now at the time, he was the mayor of San Francisco, Gavin Newsom, offered me the job to be the chief of police there. And so I went to San Francisco, and that's where I met our vice president, Kamala Harris. She was the district attorney at the time. And, San Francisco is kind of a unique place because it's a city and a county together. So unlike here, where we have 88 cities, 44 police agencies, spread over, a population of 10 million people, San Francisco is much more compact. One police department, you have your district attorney, and, population of about 900,000 people. And she was running for AG, and when she got elected to be the state attorney general, quite unexpectedly, I was offered the job of district attorney. Now, I have been involved in criminal justice for many years, not only as a police officer, but in the policy side of it. I've done a lot of work with the Kennedy School of Public Policy. I was a member of the Justice Center of the Council of State Government. So, I have been involved in not only in the enforcement side and, working, to get people arrested and prosecuted and dealing with community safety issues, but I was also involved a great deal in criminal justice. And so, by the way, I went to law school while I was in the police department. So I have been already an attorney for almost 2 decades at that point. When the offer came up quite unexpectedly, and the more I thought about it, I said, this is it would be a natural transition. I've been in policing now for a time over 30 years. So I took the job and then ran and got elected twice. And then decided to come home. This is where I grew up. This is where my family is. And when I decided to come home, people started to say, "Hey, would you consider running here?" And the rest is history. But more importantly, to the crux of your question, why go into politics? For me, it really was about the job, not the politics. Right?
Yeah, you made it sound like it was a natural transition, but
it was for me, and I'll tell you why. Right, so I've never run for any other political office. Had no interest in running for political office. As a matter of fact, when Kamala became the Attorney General of the state, I was really advocating for somebody else to take her role. But when the offer came up, it seemed like a very natural transition for the work that I was doing at the time. I had been involved in trying to strike a balance between the safety of our community and dealing with a lot of the problems that we had. The high levels of recidivism, the high levels of discrimination, disproportionality. And because I've done already a lot of work nationally and internationally in the area, I knew that there are other ways of doing business.
Sure.
And I also recognized that, as many others did, when I floated the question which I had to make a decision very quickly, by the way. People that said, the district attorneys have really they control the process in terms of what happens after an arrest, right? I mean, police makes investigations and arrests. Prosecutors decide how the case is going to be prosecuted, and then obviously juries and judges determine guilt or innocence, and then sentencing. But as to the prosecution of the case, district attorneys play that role. Within the law, district attorneys have a tremendous amount of discretion in many cases. In some areas they don't, but in other areas they do. So the application of that discretion, which is typical, has always been the case, really influences the often how cases are handled. At the same time, recognizing that, as a police chief, I had a lot of ability to impact crime rates, and as a district attorney, I have very little, right? Which is the other part, right? Most people think, well, crime up or down, and district attorneys, sometimes we like to take credit for when it goes down. We like to blame others when it goes up. But the reality is the prosecutor has almost no impact at all on crime rates. So that was a little different because I was used to being able to deploy officers to a problem and deal with, community concerns immediately, whereas a prosecutor, you're always depending on what the police is going to bring you, and then your role is very limited to the prosecution of the case.
So for you, it felt like a natural transition, and I'm hearing you say you just thought you were the best person for the job. You knew what needed to be done based on the issues at the time, and you thought, I'm the guy.
Well, I didn't go in this conversation with now our governor, saying I'm the guy. Quite frankly, I was advocating for somebody else.
Okay.
It was a retired judge.
Okay.
Who had done a lot of work with us dealing with Brady information, which has to do with, whether police departments are providing exculpatory information to the prosecutor, so the prosecutor can turn it over to the defense, which is our constitutional obligation. And in that process, I got to know this retired judge who I thought was a very intelligent, very able person, and that was really my goal. And in that conversation, the conversation switched to my becoming the district attorney. Okay. So in 2020, you won the election, and now you're seeking re-election, and you were pledging to reform the criminal justice system. I checked your website, and now you are saying that you want to modernize LA's criminal justice system. So what does that look like? And is there a difference? And it's really a continuation of this. What we, and when I say we, I'm talking about a lot of people that have been in the space for many years, is that so many of the things that we have done for many years haven't necessarily worked well, right? And we seem to continue to do the same thing over and over again, expect a different result. Often when you compare, for instance, our incarceration rates, we have the highest incarceration rates of, any comparable democracy, industrialized democracy. You look at our recidivism rate, which is, how often people reoffend,
right,
and we are off the chart. We have a higher recidivism rate than anybody also that is comparable. And so much of that I think, is because we have taken an approach that has proven not to work, right? We heavily got involved in the war on drugs. We heavily got involved in, punishment without really a thought about rehabilitation and releasing, even though that 95% of the people that we send to prisons and jails are coming back out, right? And the goal of that process should be that the persons can come back and be safely integrated into our community, which is what other parts of the world that, again, I'm talking about places that are comparable to us, democracies that are industrialized, and where they have a very low rate of recidivism because they spend a lot of efforts in holding people accountable, but then rehabilitating and facilitating the reentry. So my goal was to be able to exactly begin to look at the process differently, both how we prosecuted our case, but also influencing reentry process, which I don't control at all, right? There's a process of but influencing the process, working with nonprofits that do the work. For instance, we work with the Amity Foundation here in LA, right? The people that are going through the reentry process, they have a very low recidivism rate comparable to Europeans, right around 10%, whereas our traditional recidivism rate is somewhere around 40%. And what people often don't realize is that recidivism equals more crime, equals more victims, right? So we actually often forget that if we don't facilitate reentry, if we don't have a clear compass as how do we deal with people that are committing offenses, they will continue to reoffend.
Well, what are you suggesting as what are those tools? What do we need? What's the modernization look like? Is that who are we partnering with to make sure?
Yeah, so there are a couple of components. So as to the office, right, is improving the quality of our technology, is improving the quality, or actually we had no analytical capacity when I first became the DA, so actually bringing crime analysts that begins to look at work from different police departments and try to connect the dots, right? Okay. We have 44 agencies, 88 cities. We may have an individual that is committing crimes in one part of the county and then in another part of the county. And police are very good generally at trying to connect the dots, but sometimes, everybody's in a rush, and we sometimes have visibility to things that they don't, right? Because cases are coming in through, eventually, if they're felonies, are coming through one funnel, So bringing those things together. Now, when we're dealing in the misdemeanor world, it's a very different world, right? About a half of the county's population have city attorneys that prosecute misdemeanors, right? So we're about 10 million people. About 5 million of those, right, have a city prosecutor that handles those low-level offenses. So often we don't have visibility to that, but in the places that we do, trying to bring that together again. So one component is sort of the use of technology to improve our responses. For instance, having a centralized electronic filing system, right? When I came to office, we have 22 branches and we have everybody's filing around the county, sometimes differently. Quite frankly, you could have similar situated cases, go to Pomona and one downtown. The Pomona person gets a prison offer, downtown person gets probation, right? Justice should not be the local where, within the same county, right? So actually centralizing our workload in order to also assess the scope of the work, understanding, when we're having cases that are languishing, that are not being filed. We did not know that when I first became the DA because everybody was keeping individual information and sometimes literally spreadsheets and written in the back of a paper.
I'm sitting here shaking my head. I'm really shocked. I mean, it's the 21st century, and it doesn't sound like these are really ambitious, lofty goals. It seems like.
Yeah, but for LA County, unfortunately, they are, right?
Okay.
And, I understand. Look, we're the largest county in the country, right? If we were a state, we would be the 8th largest state, right? So, what you can do in a small county, how you can move, like what I did in San Francisco, right? You just cannot do it immediately in LA County because just the scope of the work, the sheer size, the economic impact of doing so much of this. But, moving us in that direction is important. And then also looking at, trying to understand where there is science available to tell us what are the things that have worked in the past and what are the things that actually are less likely to work, right? That old saying, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over again and expecting a different result. And frankly, we in many areas do. I mean, look, I tell young lawyers that we hire, and we've hired about 150 lawyers now. And when I say young lawyers, I don't mean necessarily in age, because we have the range. We've hired people in their late 60s and 70s, but, young to our office. But I tell them, I said, look, if you take a very good litigator, somebody who was a great litigator in the 60s and 70s, and you drop him in the courtroom today, probably with a crash course in some of the new evidentiary rules, they could probably perform extremely well. They definitely can perform very well in front of a jury. Think about it for a moment. If you, God forbid that you had cancer, right? You had to go to an oncologist, and the oncologist says, hey, I've been an oncologist since the 60s, and I continue to do business the way I did it in the 60s. Would you allow that person to do surgery? Right. I would say that you probably wouldn't, right? But yeah, in our system, we do this very often. So that's part of that modernization. It's bringing the 21st century, is bringing balanced reform to the place that we understand that some people need to go to prison because they're dangerous. Some people should go to prison because they need to be held accountable. And then the question becomes, how long is it? How long is enough? And is that the right outcome? And again, looking multiple layers down the road, because our goal is not to have to touch somebody over and over again.
Got it. Okay. And you were saying you can't bring maybe something you do in San Francisco to LA, and it sounds like you can't. Your work is not going to be done in one term, and that's why you're seeking re-election.
Well,
there's still work to be done. And
look,
I'm just thinking. So you came in 2020 thinking this is what we're going to do, and what have you learned that that's not the path anymore? Now we're going to take this path.
I mean, look, first of all, I came in the middle of a pandemic, right?
Yes,
completely
of course.
Unprecedented. You have to go to 1918 to look at anything similar, right? So I walk into a place where people were scared. They were working from home. The courts were partially shut down.
Right.
Police departments were decimated by COVID, as well as we did. We had over 500 people in my office that got COVID at different times, sometimes multiple times. We have family members that died during this process. Police departments were getting slammed. So much of what we were trying to do in the early stages was all this triaging and dealing with this thing that nobody had prepared for.
Yeah.
Nobody knew how to deal with this, and we had to weather that for over 2 years. And then, at the same time, trying to implement the things that I was elected for. I think that often some folks forget that, I got elected by a sizable majority, over 250,000 people more than my opponent. And we were very transparent. I said, this is if you elect me, these are the things that I would try to do. And then, we will obviously, as I was always done in my life, I continue to evolve. I used to be a proponent of the death penalty at one point in my life, and now I'm against the death penalty, right? Because I've learned that the death penalty doesn't work, right? So even when I came in 2020, we implemented a series of protocols and procedures, fully knowingly that some of those things would evolve with time. Also building a management team at the same time, which is very difficult, especially because we work in an environment that has very strict civil service rules. So it's not like I can walk in and bring a team in, right? It takes time to do that. So you're trying to to navigate the complexities of a pandemic. You're navigating the complexity. We lost a lot of positions that were taken away from us because of curtailment. And then, the reality, I often tell people, just think about it for a moment. Joe Biden gets elected president, and the day that he takes office, said, congratulations, Mr. President. By the way, you got to keep Donald Trump's cabinet. Now, not that Donald Trump's cabinet was good or bad. It doesn't matter. But this is what you're going to get.
Sure.
You're going to get to bring your team, right? So those are also things that, often when I talk to people, especially in industry, they shake their heads, say, how do you do that, right? And I said, well, that's how we have to do it. And, I don't complain about it. It just simply is.
It is.
But it's a reality that I have to work with.
And I'm getting the wrap-up signal, so just before we say goodbye, I just want to give you an opportunity again to meet the candidates. What would you like our listeners to know that maybe they don't know? Or what do you think's been the biggest mischaracterization about you that you would just kind of like to set it straight?
Yeah, I mean, look, one of the things I like to get across is, number one, I've spent a lifetime of public service, right? Mm-hmm. From age 18, being in the military, in the Army, volunteer, becoming a sergeant, to years in policing, to years now as a prosecutor, as a lead prosecutor. And, I'm one of those individuals that for many years, not just yesterday, I did not wake up and say, I'm going to run for Attorney General, and then I'm going to run for DA, and I don't know what the third thing is. I wake up in the morning thinking about not only the safety of our community, but how to make it better. And I go to bed thinking about the same thing. When I see, victims of violent crime, that takes a toll on me, right?
Sure.
I'm very passionate about this work. What I also know is that, I'm both a father and a grandfather and a husband. I don't want my grandkids to grow up in the world that my kids grew up in, right? I want a different world for them. I want a world where, people are judged by the contents of their character. I know this may sound a little clique, but not the way they look. And when you look at our criminal legal system, that hasn't been the case. And at the same time, I want to make sure that people that are causing harm, regardless who they are, they're being held accountable. And we're doing both. We prosecuted over 100,000 violent crimes and serious crimes that have been in office. That's on par with the last 10 years with the office. When we have things like organized retail theft that has come up, we have gone aggressively filing cases and getting convictions and sending people, many times sending people to prison. But we did so thoughtfully. We worked with the police departments, with the sheriff's department, with the CHP. We participated in a variety of task forces. At the same time, I recognized that we had holes in the law. So I worked with the legislators and the governor to make sure that we pass a package of laws to deal with the problems that we had on the theft part of this. So, just to wrap it up, look, I'm a public servant, but a public servant has been working on public safety all his life. I was honored in 2020. In fact, I was honored twice before by voters in San Francisco. And if I'm honored again in 24, I would continue to work as hard as I ever have, continue to evolve and learn. And I'm very excited about the opportunity for the future.
LA County DA George Gascon, appreciate your time, and thank you so much for sharing with our audience a little bit about you on Meet the Candidates.
My pleasure, Kari. Thank you.